Hi guys, Darren from Venom Fluid Art. Thank you so much for joining me today. So today I thought I'd show you how I take a basic tube paint like this and give it some bling. So rather than just having a basic boring colour, we're going to make it sort of look like a pigment, like a mica. So when you tilt it in the light, it's going to bling and do all sorts of crazy cool stuff. So first of all, you need to pick tube paints that have the open box, which is transparent. They work a lot better with transparents. You can use semi-transparents, semi-opaque, still works. The opaques, you don't really notice it that much in comparison to transparent. So that one's a Matisse structure. We have an Atelier here, and up in the top there somewhere, it's an open circle. So that's your transparent. Always look for transparents or semi-transparent. They work a lot better. For a pouring medium, what you want is one that when you dip your finger in it and you rub it between your fingers, you need it to turn as clear as possible. That way you know when it dries, it's going to be clear. It's not going to affect your pigments or your colours. So I know the Bear 8300 works really well in the States. There's a couple of Valspar ones that work really well. If you're in Australia, you can use, well, you used to be able to use the Taubman's Door and Trim, but that has been discontinued, unfortunately. I have another video on the Sunproof that works really well. Or you can go to a British Paints water-based enamel, which I'll put a photo up on the screen now. You can use that as well. So they dry clear, and that will work really well for what we're going to do. So what I have here is eye candy pigments. So we've got Glimmer White, which is like a pearl white. We have Sayu White, which is like a pearl white. The Glimmer White actually has a lot more bling in it. Like that. It's bigger particles compared to the other white, which is a really fine particle. We have some interference colors, which are Ghost Violet and Ghost Red. Now they're interference colors. They look white, but when the light hits them, you can see the color change. So that'll go to a violet, that'll go to a red. And then I thought for giggles, we'll tweak up a neon pigment. That's usually just a basic opaque sort of color, and we're going to bling that up as well. So what we'll do is put that to one side. I think we'll start with the tube paints first. So what we'll do is grab our little mixing cup. Now what I usually do is I'll pick, say, we'll do the Southern Ocean Blue first. Pays to wear a mask when you're using pigments and micas. Now, I'm going to put about that much on. Stick it in the container. That there is the interference of Ghost Violet, which is the interference color. So that's going to color shift. So that was about a fingernail's worth. Now, if you put the glimmer white in, you'll see the pigments are quite big, and when you pop the lid off, it all floats through the air. So just be really careful, wear a mask so you don't breathe that in. We're going to use the same amount. Put that in there. So to lighten the colour up, what we're going to do is add the Sayu white, which is a fine particle white. You'll notice it's more like a powder, really fine powder. Got to put a scoop of that in, and that will lighten the colour of the Southern Ocean blue. Alright, now what I'm going to do is add some Jo Sonja Gloss Varnish to disperse those pigments. So I'll get a squirt of that in there. Just enough to wet it all out. Then what I'm going to do is mix that. And that's going to disperse the colours. Disperse all the pigments. Just keep going until you've got no lumpy bits in it, and everything is all fluid and moving around. Don't freak out if you put too much Jo Sonja in, because you can always add a little bit more tube paint to thicken it up. Having said that, it will change the colour, it'll make it a little bit darker. So just mix that in, like so. So then you've got something that looks like that. Now, what we're going to do is get a little blob of our transparent tube paint. Now I want this to be pretty light, so I'll just put one little blob in. Like that. Only like a pea size. Mix that in. Only takes a minute. So now that that's mixed in, we now have a tube paint that's got shine and shimmer to it. So you don't have to stick with just a basic boring blue. I mean, it's a pretty blue on its own, but you can bling it up. Then what I do is I add my pouring medium to that. Put that to one side. What I usually do is put one scoop in at a time. That way you're not flooding the pigment with it all the time. Mixes in a lot nicer. So we'll mix that in. Like so. Then I'll get another scoop. Mix that in. It's long and laborious, but it's definitely a better way to add your pouring medium to it. That way you can see once it starts to change colour and it gets sort of muddied up, you don't want to add any more pouring medium to it. So I'll add a little bit more. Mix it in. That. So now we have a colour like that. that blings in the light. And it'll actually color shift to a violet, like that. Hopefully your camera can see that. So the violet pop through. And that's just with a basic tube paint. Now, if your consistency is too thin, you can always add a little bit more tube paint to thicken it up. Alright, so we'll add a blob of that. Now that's the colour we're starting with. You mix that. It's going to get darker because you've added more tube paint to it. So just keep that in mind. Mix that through. And that's getting darker and a lot thicker. So that there is pretty much perfect for a bloom. Alright, so that's how we give some tube paint some bling. I'll do the same thing with this quinacridone magenta. Okay, so what I've done is I've already mixed in the interference colors and the white and the glimmer sparkle. So what we'll do is put that to one side there, grab our other tube paint, start with just a little blob of that. So the more tube paint you add in, the darker it's going to get and the thicker it's going to get. So just keep that in mind. If when it gets too thick, just add a little bit of Joe Sonia and it will thin out. So we'll mix that in. Exactly the same as we did with the Southern Ocean Blue. Like that. Then we'll add our pouring medium. Like I say, I like to go just a little bit at a time, that way I can keep an eye on the colour. Make sure it doesn't get too muddy. Because once it gets too muddy, then you tend to lose your colour and your shimmer to it. I mean, it'll eventually dry reasonably clear, but you're better off if you just do it slowly like this. You get better results with your colours. They'll always be bright and vivid rather than looking half decent. So we're just going to keep mixing that in. It's a good way to check to see how much pigment or tube paint you can actually use in your pouring medium, like for volume wise. So you'll just keep adding your pouring medium until you start to see the colour just start to change. It'll sort of like lighten up and go a little bit muddy. Once you've reached that point, don't put any more pouring medium in, because you'll be saturating it with pouring medium rather than your pigments, micas or tube paint. Alright, so that one there turned out pretty good. Nice consistency for a bloom. And it's got loads of bling in it. So you don't have to be stuck with just boring colours that come out of a tube paint. You can bling them up to make them look like micas. That's the beauty of it. If you've already got a whole heap of tube paints, all you need to do is purchase a couple of these and you can make all your tube paints that are transparent, semi-transparent, semi-opaque. You can bling them all up so they actually look like micas even though you're not really using them. Well, apart from what you're mixing into it. So, and you only need a couple of interference colours and some sparkly ones like your glimmer white and your Sayu white. So it works out pretty cheap that way. Now we'll do a pigment. We'll do the neon, because neons are so much fun, but I like it when they bling too. So what I'm going to do is, we've already got our bling mix made up, and all we're going to do is add some magenta, and you only need just a little bit. Add that in. Now the more you add, the darker it's going to get and the less bling you're going to have. So we'll mix that one in. And we'll check what the colour's like. Alright, so that's mixed up. So we've got that colour there, but it's got a whole heap of bling in it. Then if you want it a little bit darker than that, you just grab your pigment again, add another little scoop, put that in. The more you add, the darker it's going to get. So you mix that in until there's no lumps. Now usually neon colours are a little bit harder to mix in, just because of the way they are. A lot of it's to do with the grain size, particle size, and what they're actually made from. So just make sure it's well and truly mixed and you've got no lumpy bits. Right, so now that's a lot darker. Alright. And you'll see the colour shift in it, which you don't get from neons. That shifts to a violet red, just by adding those interference colours and our little bling colours. So we'll add some pouring medium in. Like that. A little scoop at a time. Mix that one in. I know mixing videos are boring, watching things get stirred in, but you can see exactly how I'm doing it in real time, and this is what I do with all of my colours. So every colour I use is modified this way. So you can even do that with normal everyday pigments, which I will show in another video. But this is just a cool way of giving all your basic tube paints a little bit of extra life. So now we have that really bright neon, loaded full of bling, and it shifts into a purple. How cool is that? And still lights up like a Christmas tree under a black light. So you can really stretch out how many colours you can make from such a few basic colours, just by adding a little bit more colour to this, adding a little bling to that, or like the Southern Ocean blue, if you only put one little blob in, it'll go that color. If you add 2 blobs in, it'll get darker. Add 3 blobs, it gets darker again. Being a transparent, you're still going to see all the bling, no matter what you do. So, but with one basic tube paint, you can make, you know, half a dozen different shades of it. Also, you can add different coloured interference pigments in with that. Rather than using violet, you can use red, green, blue, gold, whatever you like. So when you tilt it in the light, it'll pick up those interference ghost colours, and you've got a whole variety of the same colour but that do different things, if that makes any sense. Alright, so there you go. We now have blinged up a couple of basic tube paints and a neon, which nobody really tends to bling up neons. So now you can. How cool is that? Alright guys, if that was any help to you at all, please click like, share and subscribe and ring that notification bell. That way you get to see all my videos as I release them. For eye candy pigments, if you have a look in my description, there will be a link. If you use the coupon code Venom Fluid Art, you'll get a 10% discount off your next purchase of eye candy pigments. So, saving your money all the way. Alright guys, thank you so much for joining me. I'm about to do another video for Sunday, which I'll do another one on mixing pigments, and we'll have a bit of a play with them. So, alright guys, have fun, take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.